Marketplace with Charles on an 11-day tour of the Holy Land. Take the route Israel traveled to the Promised Land, cross over the Red Sea, and float on the Dead Seas, the lowest point on earth with amazing healing properties. Experience the vibe of Jericho and cruise on the Sea of Galilee to Capernaum, the hometown of Jesus. Visit the pools of Bethesda, Nazareth, Bethlehem, and many more. Walk where Jesus walked and see the Bible come alive. If beautiful memories and an enriched spirit is what you are looking for, then join us in taking Jesus to the marketplace. For more information, call us on +27 72 123 0078 or email israel@artofskincare.co.za.
Welcome to Marketplace with Charles, where dreams are turned into reality. Marketplace is brought to you by Art of Skincare. Art of Skincare, the company that brings out the beauty in you, as well as Kuisa Lodge, situated at the deep heart of Mabalingwe Nature Reserve, where you sleep, dream, and wake up with the big five surrounding you. What an experience. If tranquility is what you are looking for, then Kuisa Lodge is the place to be. I am Charles Ngobeni. On Marketplace, we empower and equip you with tools that you need to achieve your entrepreneurial dreams. Each week, we bring you insight from experts in different fields of business, both from men and women of faith. On today's program, we meet a business strategist whose core business involves scaling up women-owned and managed business to do more trade within our continent. She's a dynamite. She is a leadership development practitioner, shaping business leaders, and also runs a non-profit initiative aimed at amplifying women's voices of African women, which is the focus of today's conversation. My guest holds that women are not silenced, they are muted. That means that muting women is muting more than half of the world's population. Failing to hear the voices of half of the world's population is depriving the world of a wealth of ideas that could influence positive changes in the whole world. My guest today will delve deeper into the reasons she believes opening the floor for the African woman could make a difference in shaping our continent productively, and thus making the world a better place to live in. Help me welcome Ms. Rehema. I hope I'm correct.
Slightly, Rehema.
Rehema. You know, I've been battling Rehema.
Rehema is just with grace.
Awesome, Rehema. Ms. Rehema Isa, welcome to Marketplace with Charles.
Charles, thank you very much for having me on the Marketplace, and a good day to your viewers.
Rehema, it's my pleasure to have you. I could not wait for this day after I heard about you. I understand you are dynamite. You are an expert in what you do. Do you want to tell the whole world who Rehema is?
Charles, I don't think I would have enough time to tell the whole world exactly who I am, but I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit about my story.
Yes.
And what I do and impacting women's voices.
I understand you are involved with the TEDxLytteltonWomen?
That's correct. I'm involved with TEDxLytteltonWomen. I've been involved with TEDxLytteltonWomen for the last 5 years.
Yes.
And in that time, we have introduced no less than 65 women, African women, to a global platform where their ideas, perspectives, contributions, and just ways of thinking have been shared with the whole world.
Mm-hmm. And do you want to go deeper into this TEDxLytteltonWomen? What is it?
Absolutely. TEDxLytteltonWomen is part of a global brand. Mm-hmm. And so the global brand that everybody interacts with is TED. So typically nowadays, when anybody's looking for information, everybody goes to Google. And when people are looking for insights or fresh ways of thinking or expert content, they Google for TED. And on TED, you are able to find information from a various number of contributors. Typically, these are global participants and global contributors like your Oprahs, like your Bill Gates, have been contributors on the TED platform where they share their perspectives. And what TED did some years ago is that they opened up this platform appreciating that ideas worth spreading are not just by famous people. It could be the person next door. And what they did is they came up with the Tedx brand, which is TED-like experiences. And these experiences are available wherever an organizer gets a license and makes it available to participants. So TEDxLytteltonWomen, you'll see that it's TEDx and then Littleton and then women.
Yeah.
And so the suffixes after the TEDx, basically Littleton is my area of operations. And so I had a Tedx Littleton brand. And the women is specifically through an appreciation that the voices that are globally available rarely contain women's voices. And so there is a TEDx Women brand that invites organizers to organize events that's specifically looking at including and attracting women's voices. Hence you have TEDxLytteltonWomen.
Would I be correct if I say you are then linked to an international brand?
Absolutely. One of the biggest global brands in terms of content that's contributed every day. TEDx loads no less than 100,000 talks. And I think that they have a viewership of over 1 billion per annum. So it's linked to a major global brand that is essentially only out there to share ideas for free.
Ma'am, I've got a problem here. Women are being empowered.
Right.
On a daily basis.
Right.
We even have got a special day in a year, which is like your Women's Day.
Right.
We are taking care of women from a young age.
Right.
When we talk of a gender-based violence, it looks like we're talking about a man fighting women. We never even think that there are some women fighting men, which is possibility.
Agreed.
All over the world, we empower women, and women today, I must be honest with you, they've been literally empowered. And they bring more bacon than men, which is a challenge to some of us men.
Right.
Tell me, why is it that you yourself, you are still focusing much on women whom we believe they are more empowered than men today? We forget about the boy child. We forget about the men because men are tigers, men don't cry. Why do you focus specifically on women?
Right. And so my point of departure is to take the perspective that you shared, which is yours.
Yeah.
Women are already empowered. I suppose I can only answer as a woman and my lived reality, which contradicts your notion of empowerment.
Okay.
And so and my reality is a shared reality. And I think being in a space where I specifically work with women in their spaces and with their voices. And so I always like to make conversations a little bit economic, because I think when we talk in these abstract terms, it's very easy to say we're doing enough. So we're part of African continent, right?
Okay.
And the African continent signed in the last 2 years the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. To give you a notion of women's empowerment, let's look at the political presentation of women. On one of the world's largest free trade agreements connecting 54 countries to each other and opening up trade throughout the continent, the signatories of that agreement were completely male. Let's understand that empowerment starts at a very political sphere, and that political sphere allows us to understand what kind of policies and enacted legislation that actually empowers women. If women were so empowered, we'd need to understand that a larger number of our corporations barely have women at the C-suite and above, at the chairs of boards and at executive positions, which means we have to beg the question, what do we mean by empowerment? When we look at certain economic spaces, and we talk about women's contribution in the spaces, the one that I love is agriculture, and to take what your notion of empowerment looks like. On the African continent, we tend to hear that 80% of Africa's labor force in the agriculture space is women. But nobody can sit back and tell me how much of that agriculture dollar spend ends up in the hands of women. So let's understand empowerment and what it actually is beyond the words that we apply and say women are empowered. The reality is that when you walk into workspaces, women are not empowered in the sense that they don't have equal access to opportunity. When capital is being diverted, women don't have the same kind of access to capital, which has meant that globally and on the continent, there is moves to ensure that women have got access. And that access is not just a matter of opening the door and women can sign, but it means that the spaces that are actually there to facilitate women's contribution and access to that capital are so gender disenfranchised in the sense that women have to go through additional hoops. In many countries on the continent, women still have to bring their husbands to be able to sign deals. Women are not allowed access to property. So I have to always ask the question that we're doing so much. What does that much actually equate to? A lot of women are participating in the workforce, which we call labor that is not paid for. So we tend to find women empowered. Yes, we are running homes. We are the mothers to the new presidents. However, we are not the presidents. What does empowerment mean?
You see, now when I say we are sitting with a dynamite here, you have already transformed my thinking. Now I feel I was wrong. Rahana, I think on that note, we need to take a break. I need to think deeper on these things, because now I'm a little bit confused. Well, viewers out there, whilst I'm still going to think a little bit about this, let's take a break. We'll be back shortly. Welcome to Marketplace with Charles. I am still sitting here with a great woman who knows her story. Rahana, I need you to tell our viewers there what impact of the continent's economy do you feel that empowering women will have?
So I think it'll have significant impact. And let's not be naive to believe that, this notion of empowering in one space is going to have that impact. My personal passion, obviously, is, as I said, is economic empowerment.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to be able to facilitate that. We've got to walk a journey that actually accommodates women where they're at. And I think that for me is part of the conversation and narrative about finding women's voices. Often initiatives are thrown at women and therefore go on this program and therefore you're empowered. Very few programs are actually asking women what empowerment means, what it looks like, what it needs to translate to. I've got it very clear in my mind, but I cannot begin to say that I represent women. Women are not a homogenous grouping that you do one thing and it satisfies everybody. So for me, for instance, my notion of empowerment means that my daughter doesn't have to ask the questions that I am. She doesn't have to knock on the doors and beg to participate. She doesn't have to enter rooms and come with piles and piles of receipts that show and demonstrate that she's paid her dues, that her presence is accepted simply because of the journey that she's walked and it's valid enough. And I think for me, this thing about what does it actually mean for women to be in these spaces, is really about making sure we create conducive environments. We allow for women's convenings, but not as separate conversations. I don't know if you've participated in this as a man, but whenever we go to conferences, there's a section about women, as if we're an additional extra.
Yeah.
They're not part of the mainstream conversation. You'll have a conversation on investment in Africa, and then you will have a 30-minute women's conversation with only women in the room, and yet those who are holding the money are not women. It's a reality about creating the convening spaces. It's a reality about making sure that that capital speaks to where women want that money, the kind of businesses women want to be in. It's about ensuring not only that, but the legislative environment makes it compulsory that organizations are actually penalized for not taking into consideration the other half of this continent. It's also about making sure that we have a way of monitoring, tracking, and evaluating women's impact. And I think for me personally, this begins with giving women voice.
And now, how do you achieve this goal of amplifying women's voice?
I've chosen the TEDxLytteltonWomen route, and I'll tell you a little story about how that started. I've always worked in women's development for the last 15 or so years, and what I found is that we have got so many brilliant women, but when you go to conferences, and I challenge all of you, when you go into a conference right now and they talk about the experts, the panel is all male. Now, I for one went to college varsity, postgrad with a lot of men, but there were also a lot of women in the room. And I always wonder, what happened to those women's voices? Is it that the only experts who can talk about the future are male? That sounds very bizarre. So for me, it started off with attempting to put women on platforms. And I would knock on doors and say, I've got these amazing, phenomenal women. And you know what I was asked? Are they famous? Who knows them? What's their following? So for a woman to create a space to actually participate and give her voice, she had to be famous. It was irrelevant that this woman came with a great amount of mental acumen to put to the table. We want to know if she's pretty. We want to know if she's Instagram friendly before we put her on a platform, which has meant that the kind of women that you tend to see on platforms are not the kind of women you see in the boardrooms. But that's not just the only reality out there. So for me, amplifying voice has been about specifically going out and finding women like me that actually know their story, know what they're talking about, and making sure that they have access to a platform, and making sure that that platform is not local, it is global.
But do you sometimes sit down to reflect and measure your success? If so, how do you measure this success?
I think the beautiful thing about platforms, I think platforms are extremely powerful things, and there's a huge responsibility for A, being on a platform, and B, sharing platform. And I measure success by a number of immediate quick fixes, because we all like a quick fix. It makes you feel good. Quick fixes for me is the number of people who get to see the talks. So I talk about 65 women, and I know that over 400,000 people around the world have watched these 65 women who people haven't seen before. It's not even 65, we're still uploading. I'd say it's about 40 women so far. So 300,000 people who would never have known about Isbu in Mbeleko, in KZN. They wouldn't have known about a Maureen in Ghana. They wouldn't have known about an Agnes that does social, who does work on the environment. They wouldn't have known about these women. Get to know them. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think these global bodies that are looking for fellowships and women, etc., are tapping into the same pool of women. I know that majority of my speakers have gone on to speak on global platforms, are major contributors in their spaces, and are often called upon as expert contributors. We've broken some of those barriers to say that you only have to look a certain way and be a certain way. We're actually showing up and saying, just because we are not available in other spaces doesn't mean we don't have the content to shape the world. So my impact indicators are not just about the room. I can have 30 people in the room, but I'll have over 300,000 people watching those speakers. That for me is impact.
I'm too jealous. I wish I was a woman. Are you able to accommodate me on your platform? Look, I love that platform. I love that space. I want to work on that space. But unfortunately, I'm a male and you're dealing with women.
I am dealing with women, and I think that, I get a lot of men asking me about that. And I've also got to clarify, there are a number of TEDx's in the country. There's only one TEDx Littleton Women that I only host an event once a year. So this is the typical response. I wish I was on that platform. When we see platforms that are only male, nobody says anything. As soon as we curate a space and we deliberately look for women to articulate their content, there's always a hands up and saying, why can't we be there? What I invite you is the next time you see a platform that's only got male, ask the question, how can I get a woman on this space?
A nice one. But then let's come back to the topic of the day. How do you solicit women to join you?
It's been a journey. It's been 5 years. Yes. The first year I was begging women, friends, family, please come speak. Yeah. But I think
I love that. I love that. Because sometimes we've got a problem of impacting and changing the whole world when you forget about your own kids at home.
Charles, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it really has started at home. So I looked at my local and African network, and I invited people that I knew to get onto the platform. Many of them said no. They still say no. And then essentially what I have been very deliberate about is about curating an alumni. Organizations, institutions, experiences are only as powerful as its alumni. I've had an alumni that's been able to stretch out their tentacles and to spread the word. And so by January, February, we're calling out. We're on social media, we're on media networks. We participate in spaces like this where we're saying women who are out there who've got an idea worth spreading that could impact your community. Understand, when you're impacting your community here, there's somebody somewhere else in the world who's never heard it. You could impact somebody else out there. And we invite people to join us. And once they've joined us, we work with them. I've got a team of coaches, curators who actually work with developing speaker content, speaker delivery, so that when a woman is standing up on that stage and she's an African woman, she doesn't have to deal with all these other challenges of, does she sound like this? Does she look like that? We make sure that the women are on point. They can compete and actually surpass global expectations of the African women.
Tell me, what have you seen women accomplishing because of what you are doing?
I would be remiss to take responsibility for me being what they are accomplishing. And I think this is it, right? We often see spaces where there's an award for women. We come in at a point in time of a woman's journey. And this is my point about women not being silenced. Women are out there doing phenomenal stuff. I acknowledge that all I'm doing is reflecting at a point in time what these women are doing. I don't make them. They are self-made.
Do you have some few examples of the success stories out there?
I have a number of success stories. We've had a number of phenomenal speakers on this platform right from the beginning. If I speak them off the top of my head, you're taking me back 5 years. Sbumieni Mbeleko Foundation, Valley of 1,000 Hills. Her children basically belong to what we call the Valley of 1,000 Dreams. And she's been able to get external and international exposure onto Eisenhower Fellowship. We have Alisa. And Alisa is basically a South African entrepreneur who works in Silicon Valley. And she went on and did talks with lots of global players and runs an international entrepreneurship program. Deals with entrepreneurs, and she does venture capital, but she's also a successful entrepreneur. I think the ones perhaps that I always say that, there's those that have walked the path, they continue to do powerful things. Look out for this year's. This year's online, just in the last few days, we've got Josina Michelle, who talks about gender-based violence, and she provides a perspective of being the daughter to 2 presidents and not being immune from gender-based violence. We've got Lebogang Pheko, who talks about the feminist economy. And I think that the reality is that kind of conversation is imperative right now on the African continent, where our economics has got to have a very feminist outlook. We have Pokwane Molele, who's part of Alitea IDF, and they're part of funding, one of the largest funds for African women to access funding on the continent. I have a number of phenomenal speakers. We've got Muruna Mutele. She's a 20-year-old female activist who will make you sit back and think about why the political landscape has been so male. Gosh, I could go on.
You make me feel like going to my room now, change on my suit, and put on a dress.
That's just one part of the journey. There's so much more to being a woman.
But if someone out there wants to be part of what you're doing, wants to be impacted by your organization, how do they do that?
I always invite people either through our social media handles, TEDxLytteltonWomen on Instagram or on Facebook or on Twitter, or just to send us an email, info@TEDxLytteltonWomen.com. And every year we are looking for volunteers. We are a completely non-for-profit, and it's driven entirely by volunteers. So people are not sitting back and getting paid to do this. It's because they actually believe that the voices need to be heard and they're willing to put in their 2 cents. And so we welcome volunteers to join our team.
I need you to say some few parting words which you feel that will empower women out there. If there's a woman on the street sitting down and say, I'm useless, I've got nothing, what can you say to that woman?
That's a bit of a tough one. But I think what I would say is that there's an underestimated perspective of the African woman. And often it's because we look at terms in very historic ways. African women might be disenfranchised, but they're not always disempowered because we are powerful. And because we have that power, the idea around African women is to collaborate a lot more. So find another sister. There's always a sister out there who's willing to extend her hand and walk the journey. And if you are that sister that's in a position to hold out that hand, I would say hold it out. But that journey is not about women on women. Here's the reality is that we live together with men. And so maybe the invitation is not for the woman on helping the other woman, but for the men to be a lot more conscious about the fact that we are here, we are present, and the spaces that you occupy and you walk into and take for granted, don't do the same for women. So perhaps the call is not for the disempowered woman, but for the empowered male to use that power wisely.
Well, thank you very much for gracing our studios. It has been my pleasure to have you.
It's been such a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, viewers, I am Charles Ngobeni signing off on Marketplace with Charles. Remember, women, you are powerful. There is nothing in this world, even during the time of Jesus Christ, that was done without a woman. You have got great influence. You have got greatness within you. You have got all that it takes. You can also get hold of me on charlesngobeni.com, Instagram Charles_Ngobeni, or you can go on my YouTube channel and watch this episode over and over again. Hopefully you'll be more inspired and join this great group. Well, see you next time, same channel. Bye.
Join Marketplace with Charles on an 11-day tour of the Holy Land. Take the route Israel traveled to the Promised Land. Cross over the Red Sea and float on the Dead Seas, the lowest point on earth with amazing healing properties. Experience the vibe of Jericho and cruise on the Sea of Galilee to Capernaum, the hometown of Jesus. Visit the pools of Bethesda, Nazareth, Bethlehem, and many more. Walk where Jesus walked and see the Bible come alive. If beautiful memories and an enriched spirit is what you are looking for, then join us in taking Jesus to the marketplace. For more information, call us on +27 72 123 0078 or email israel@artofskincare.co.za.